Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. We're doing another Old Farts Watching Anime, and this is one somebody recommended a little while ago, and I thought, it looks pretty dark, pretty extreme. I'm kind of looking forward to this one. This is called Death Note, and it's actually been made a couple of interesting rounds in the news a little while ago because this is apparently something that kids are kind of doing in school sometimes. So I don't know the entire connotations of that, but I'm really looking forward to checking out the anime. So let's watch Death Note. Are we playing Limbo?
I just have one more question I want to ask you. Why was I chosen for this?
I have a feeling with all this Apple imagery, we're going to have like a biblical element going on,
Apples
maybe?
in the human world are worth the trip. What's the best way to describe these? Juicy?
So, Death Note, eh? That was an interesting one. I really liked that one. I didn't know a lot about it before we saw the reason, in addition to somebody recommending it, one of the subscribers saying, hey, check out Death Note. I also, as I mentioned in the intro there was somebody we were watching on YouTube who talked about how somewhere in the US, some kid got, I don't know if it was like an officially licensed Death Note book, or he just got a book and painted it black and put Death Note on it. But he actually started writing the names of other kids in class. And the teachers, I guess they didn't know at first, what the heck does this mean? But they eventually were like, hey, that's not good. You don't start behaving like that. So I just thought, yeah, okay, I think I've got a hint of what the storyline is. And now having watched it, very intriguing. Now, what I really like is the gray area of our central character, Light. An odd name for a guy, but whatever. How he, like most people, finds this book and thinks it's a joke and tries it out and is like, oh no, it's for real, and very rapidly turns kind of dark with it, and I like that. I find that refreshing. Now, what I also, there was a little part of the plot that I have a feeling, because we're watching this on Netflix with English dubbing and the English version, and so there's stuff in here that I wonder if the original anime actually has it, but I'll get to that later. I also wanted to touch on Ryuk, I think his name is, the angel, the angel of death fella that we first see down in Limbo or something, or I jokingly called it Limbo because I was thinking of the video game, but he's in this sort of abyss between worlds area that they had, this Mishigami, butchering the name, I apologize to those who know.
Is it Shimugami?
Shimugami?
Something like that.
Maybe that. But it was interesting to follow him because you initially think because of his look, he's obviously the bad guy of the show. He's not really. In the conversation later with Light, he's kind of like just laying out, here's the story of the book, and I'm really surprised so many names have been added already by you. That was pretty cool. I like that. So, yes, Dee, what did you think?
Well, I was I really did like the art style between the Limbo world and the human world, because it was very gray and only certain areas had touches of color. I thought that was very cool. And then you get down into the human world, there's a lot more color, but then there's certain things like when Light's mother brings him the apples that are very vivid.
True.
Yeah. So, and I'm assuming that there are certain things that quite pronounced, because there are specific ideas that they're trying to put forward with that. I ended up getting a little confused. I didn't realize that the kid's name was Light. So you caught on to that before I did.
Well, in my defense, what had happened is I actually looked up a few things before we started watching the show, and that's how I noticed they always referenced things about the character called Light. So when I heard his name on the show, I thought, oh, okay, that's Light. That's an unusual name. And there was also another mention of somebody called L, like just the letter L. I wonder if, now we've only seen the first episode, but because we're watching this on Netflix, you get a little logo of, here's the show you're about to watch. And there's this girl, sort of a Britney Spears with like ponytails, schoolgirl type of character that I saw in a few bits, even in the intro I did. She hasn't shown up. I wonder if that's L, but again, it's just the letter L is the way the name of the character is. So I don't know what that situation is. Now, the other part that I wanted to ask, as I mentioned earlier, there was one complication that I think maybe if we were watching the original Japanese version would come up. So it's clearly Japan, it's Tokyo, the character names are all Japanese names, totally makes sense except for Light. And in the bit where he finds the book, there are times when you see he's writing Japanese names, and there's a little subtitle, what that name is and all that kind of stuff. But the instructions are in English, and it says Death Note along the front of the book. And I wonder, they did do a good job of explaining. There's a line that Ryuk throws out there of, that's why I wrote it in English, the most common language. It's like, okay, that's sort of covering that. But I wonder if actually in the original anime, is there English there, or was that... Because I was sitting there like, I was really confused. Light is asked to say in the classroom something in English, and I'm like, well, we're listening in English. I know it's translated from Japanese, so my head is going in two different directions of, okay, are we watching everything converted from Japanese to English, and in which case is the word Death Note written in Japanese characters in the original anime? I don't know. I found it very confusing, but... That's one minor weird part, and not knowing who that girl character is. That also kind of threw me off. However, outside of that, I'm very intrigued. I like the dark element. I like the fact that Light is not necessarily a good guy, and I like the fact that Ryuk is not necessarily a bad guy, and the whole premise of, like, what would happen if you had a book where you could magically kill anybody? What would you do with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean... A lot of times when we go to do, this series, I don't know what we're getting into. It's a bit of a surprise to me. So, I mean, you do a bit more of the research than I do. So I was very surprised, when he's in the beginning, when he's sitting in the classroom and they're talking about religion at the end of the episode, and he's, Light is kind of like, well, I'm going to rule.
I think he even says, "I'll be the god of this new world."
Yeah. So, that was very interesting. It's a lot different than a lot of the ones that we have watched in the past, which is very refreshing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I think we'll possibly watch more of that one. It's a very good recommendation.
Yeah.
Thanks to the person whose name totally escapes me right now who suggested it, but well done. And until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.
See you next time.